hearty welcome to one and all. This is episode 139 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for joining me on this. Stop me if you've heard this before. Rainy Tuesday in New York. But if you're catching this episode on the YouTube channel or enjoying the content but haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, and turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Spotify or iTunes, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. So today is going to be the 12th entry into our apparently popular continuing series, The Best Movie You've Never Seen. We're going to take a look back at a film that is now more than 4 decades old. Wow. It's directed by the man who wrote the screenplay for Star Wars Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back, and later directed a very popular to this day Western called Silverado, among others, and starring an Academy Award-winning actor who made a shit ton of great films in the 80s, 90s, and moving forward. The writer-director is Lawrence Kasdan. The actor is William Hurt. And the movie is the 1981 Neo-noir classic Body Heat, which I would say that some of you will have seen this, but as I often point out, it's very unlikely anyone under 30 has seen this movie. It has not been free on streaming or any of the major platforms as far as I know, and this is the kind of movie I keep tabs on because there are certain friends, I've never seen it. It certainly hasn't been on Netflix. It has not been streaming free on Prime. It's never been on Max because it was not a HBO, Turner, etc. property. But it is an old, it's ironic to say old school, old fashioned, because when the movie came out, critics of the day, Roger Ebert, people like that, Pauline Kael, they pointed out that it was old school. It's not a period piece. Now it's of a period, but it took place at the time in which it was produced. The movie was shot in the late 1980, 1981 on location in Florida, and it deliberately harkens back to the classic film noir. And for those who don't know, film noir is not really a genre, although some people mistakenly refer to it as a genre. It isn't. It's a style. It's a very particular style, and there are those who would say, well, the style in and of itself becomes a genre. Not here to fight. I'm just here to tell you what I know. It's a style of filmmaking, emphasizing light and shadow, contrasts between dark and light, and often contrasts between good and evil. And the classics of the 40s, you're talking movies like Night of the Hunter and Out of the Past, one of the greats, Jacques Tourneur, starring two of the all-timers, Kirk Douglas, aka Michael's dad, and Robert Mitchum, who usually played bad guys. In that movie, they kind of flipped it. But you talk about like Double Indemnity with Fred MacMurray, the cheapest man in the history of Hollywood, Barbara Stanwyck, movies like The Woman in the Window, Scarlet Street. These are all masterpieces in that realm. Film noir. Laura, another famous film with Clifton Webb. And Body Heat, because it was made in 1981 or came out in 81, it's an R-rated variation on the typical story of often a kind of face, a baby face, as they say in wrestling, somebody who is a good guy, maybe doesn't have really much in the way of chutzpah, stones, guts behind him, but he's your basic patsy. And generally speaking, in the classic film noirs, the main character is a patsy who gets taken to the cleaners, sometimes literally, taken out with the trash, sometimes literally, by an unscrupulous femme fatale, a beautiful, mysterious woman who, the guy might enjoy himself for a time. He might get to have a lot of sex, which was all implied in the 40s into the 50s. But she's not really acting in his best interests, and usually not in the best interests of her husband or significant other or whichever other gentleman caller might be in her life. the movie Body Heat is set entirely in Florida. And I should point out, you have some great future stars in critical supporting roles in this film. Now, not so much Richard Crenna. Richard Crenna plays the husband of the second lead, the female lead, the amazing Kathleen Turner, who had been a soap opera star and then switched over to movies. And not long after this, on the strength of this performance and how fucking fire she is, not just to look at, but what a great actress. The way that she's able to emote and calibrate based on what she needs out of the other characters in each individual scene. It's not something that necessarily can be taught. She acts with her eyes. She acts with her smoky voice, very much Lauren Bacall-esque. And when she met Lauren Bacall around this time, and Lauren Bacall was excited to meet her, she had loved this movie. And Kathleen tells the story that she went up to Lauren Bacall and said, "It's so great to meet you. They say that I'm the young you." But another version of the story is that Lauren Bacall sought her out and said, "I wanted to meet you. You're the young me." So nobody really knows exactly what it was, but it was the fact that Kathleen, because of the smoky voice, she came across as older than she was. She was very young when the movie Body Heat was shot. She was 24, 25, but in that ballpark. Richard Crenna, right? Richard Crenna, what a great actor he was. Right, so Richard Crenna, Colonel Troutman in the Rambo movies, the early ones with Sly. Richard Crenna played a lot of great supporting roles, and in this movie, he plays Kathleen Turner's husband. The kind of setup that I mentioned in movies from the 40s like Scarlet Street, Laura, Woman in the Window, Double Indemnity. William Hurt, in this movie, plays an attorney who is it's not that he's dumb, but he's not that good of a lawyer. And this is something you don't see that often in movies. We've seen, and we talked about in a previous episode, Austin Pendleton, a great actor from a lot of movies in the 90s, that he plays an attorney in My Cousin Vinny, and he can't get the words out. He has like stage fright, and he's useless despite being intelligent. The movie Body Heat has William Hurt as someone who he's not as good an attorney as he should be based on his intelligence. He's just a shitty lawyer. But he's looking for something exciting, as so many of the noir heroes have and had in the earlier movies in those iterations. And bear in mind, a movie like Basic Instinct, which I've talked about and many of you know, it's a film noir. It's a thriller, psychological thriller, suspense thriller, erotic thriller, a lot of sex. I don't even need to put it in quotes, a lot of sex. But it has the style of noir. Now, Body Heat is way better than Basic Instinct. Body Heat runs rings around any of those 90s erotic thrillers, whether you want to talk Jade, Body of Evidence, even The Last Seduction. William Hurt plays an attorney. He wants something exciting in his life. It's 90 degrees every day. Nobody seems to have air conditioning anywhere in Fort Lauderdale or Miami. They're all sweating to death in restaurants, in staterooms, in bar rooms, in musty offices of law firms. Everyone is just burning up. But it is a movie that it sneaks up on you, and you don't know what's hit you until it's over, and you say, wow, didn't see that coming, didn't see this coming. There's a whole bunch of elements in this story where you say, didn't see it coming. Because the movie settles into a conventional pattern. And I'm going to try to avoid spoilers because this is another film to seek out if you don't mind seeing a little sex, or in the case of this movie, a lot of sex. This is a fantastic mystery thriller movie that goes places you're not expecting. And as we've seen, there's some great stuff on YouTube with younger people watching older movies, older than this, and being shocked at what filmmakers were allowed to get away with. Because there's all this talk of, with the production code, and until the rating system, you couldn't show nudity, you couldn't have cursing. And then there are movies where you say, wow, I didn't know they were allowed to do this. Have contemporary film scholars in their early 20s, late teens, watch A Clockwork Orange. They'll be, how the hell did they make this movie? Body Heat has a lot of the, how the hell did they get away with this elements? But William Hurt as this kind of, I don't want to say sad sack because he's a young man with his life ahead of him, but he's not necessarily in a good place. And he meets a woman played by Kathleen Turner, your classic seductress, femme fatale. And I think it was Roger Ebert, the late great film critic, the Pulitzer Prize winner, who said, you know the main character is in trouble just by the way this woman crushes the cigarette under her foot. It's a metaphor. He might as well be the cigarette. But we don't know that. He sure as hell doesn't know that. All he knows is this woman is hot, she's loaded, and I know the husband a little bit just through inference because we work in the same town, even though we're not in the same field. And he meets Kathleen Turner as Maddie Walker, a great name. Maddie Tyler Walker. And William Hurt plays Ned Racine. What a dull, boring name for a guy who is kind of dull and boring and needs a little spice. He needs some excitement in his life. And here comes the spectacular Maddie Walker to juice up his existence. Now, if this movie was nothing but a woman running around on her kind of pain-in-the-ass husband who she more or less married because he had a lot of money and she always dreamed of having money, there wouldn't be much of a movie. But as in the classic noirs of the 40s, and I would argue that this movie is at least as good as any of those films. And I've seen Scarlet Street, I've seen A Woman in the Window, actors like Edward G. Robinson, and as I said, Clifton Webb. This film takes the outline of those stories and to me makes it better, more exciting, more vibrant. And I mentioned supporting characters in this film. A very young Mickey Rourke plays a former client of William Hurt's character, Ned Racine. And even though Mickey's character is in jail, his name's Teddy Lewis in the film, even though Mickey's character is in jail, we get an idea that this was actually a case where Ned did a good job for his client, did not fuck up, that this guy could have gotten more, but Ned did some clever lawyering and got him a lesser charge. Because Mickey, as Teddy Lewis in the movie, even says, I wouldn't be on the street if it weren't for you. Implying you did a good job. And giving us a little window into the fact that, okay, maybe he's not that incompetent, but there are certain aspects of law that he really ought to practice a little bit more because he's made some sloppy mistakes that if it happened today, the guy probably wouldn't work again. So it's like he's a young guy, he's clearly intelligent, but maybe he's just a little bit lazy. Maybe he's a little bit unfocused. And a lazy and unfocused attorney who then starts having sex with the hottest woman he's ever seen, and she is insatiable. She is presented as insatiable. He's even complaining at one point in the movie, I'm red, I'm sore. Now picture me, 10 years old, watching this movie. I should not have been watching this movie. But I'm 10 years old, and I got to see some little bit of nudity. I shouldn't have seen that. Sorry, Mom. There I am, adorable, apple-cheeked, curly red-haired Jeremy sitting there at home, alone, watching Cinemax. I don't remember where my parents were. And there's William Hurt in a tub with Kathleen Turner. He looked really old. William Hurt was like 31 at the time. He asked me how old he was. Yeah, he's got to be in his 50s. It's very difficult when you're a kid to judge people's ages, unless you already know. So they're laying in this tub. And he says, you are killing me. I'm red, I'm sore. And she says, you're sore. You've got a lot of nerve. If somebody had pop quiz 10-year-old me at that moment, do you have any idea what they're talking about? No, I don't really understand what they're doing in the tub either, if we're being completely honest. No idea. I mean, I knew that, I guess they were having sex. It more looked like they were rolling around and he was almost cuffing her around a little bit. But a lot of the early part of the movie is that they connect, and it is to the movie's credit. And this is going to be a vague spoiler, I apologize, but it's not really going to give anything away. The movie posits and presents it in such a way that how they meet, that it appears to not be on purpose. It appears to be happenstance. It appears to be a woman goes to a certain bar at a certain time, a couple of days a week, and a guy also frequents that bar and one day decides to chat her up. That's not at all what it is. In the movie Creepshow 2, a horror movie released several years after this film, there's this deadly, it looks like an oil slick. And one of the characters says, most oil slicks, they don't look like anything in particular. It's a big sticky mess. It looks like an accident. This thing doesn't look like an accident. It looks like it's on purpose. We believe, and the movie presents us with a reality in which there is no reason for us to question that Ned Racine and Maddie Walker met by chance. But through the contortions and the permutations of this labyrinthine, another thing that's surprising is just how twisty and serpentine this plot is. We don't question how they met. But towards the end of the movie, when we start running it back in our head, we say, wait a second, this was not an accidental meeting. The movie presented it. The movie doesn't tell us it's an accident, but it throws information at us where we're not even going to think about it as anything other than, wow, my man got lucky here. Yeah, well, maybe he temporarily got exceedingly lucky. Or maybe this was the single worst thing that ever happened, that he decided to go after that hot married woman. You know, in the pre-AIDS era, we talked about in Fatal Attraction and movies like that, even Basic Instinct, people were nervous about not only unprotected sex, but about straying outside marriage, being a good little boy, behaving yourself. In a world of this movie, Ned Racine doesn't give a shit that Maddie Walker is married. And you want to say, well, it's a little bit of a cautionary tale without being a cautionary tale. Well, if he's following any kind of moral compass, if he has one, he's not going for a married woman in the first place. Yeah, she's really hot, but the minute he sees her wedding band, or the minute she says, I'm not entirely thrilled with my husband, nice knowing you, you know? No, thank you. I'm all set here. No, thank you. Ted Danson, just before Cheers began, plays William Hurt, aka Ned Racine. He plays, the character's name is Lowenstein. He's a DA, and he's a great attorney. He is presented in a little bit of a clownish sort of way, but he's a great attorney. And he's worried about Ned, William Hurt's character, because Ned is getting himself involved in something that this can't work out in his favor. Because Ned leaves certain gaps out as far as what's going on in the story. He doesn't tell his friends exactly what he's up to, but he gives them enough where they're starting to say, this can't have a good outcome. You need to get yourself out of this situation. Yes, the woman's going to pay you good money if you're her attorney. That's fine. But getting involved with her, this is not good. This is not a good idea. And Danson has what I think it's an extraordinary moment in a movie that is not funny. This is a very straightforward thriller in terms of genre. Like there's very little hints of humor. There's not even the basic instinct of Michael Douglas when asked how his social life is. He says, I've got calluses, and we giggle. This movie has one extraordinary moment as everybody is burning up. It's so fucking hot. You would think a high-end Fort Lauderdale or Miami-Dade law firm in 1981 would have air conditioning, but everybody seems to be sweating their you-know-whats off. So you have a bunch of attorneys in this kind of conference room. William Hurt among them, and Kathleen Turner, he's with her. They're involved in this proceeding. And everybody is lighting up. They're all smoking, whether it's cigarettes or cigars, they're all smoking. And it looks like it's about 90 degrees in there. I can't even imagine the combination of smells of people's perfume and cologne and booze and cigars, maybe some Cuban cigars and cigarettes. And Ted Danson, this is my favorite Ted Danson moment, I think, in any movie, because he's had much an up and down movie career. And Ted Danson is just sitting there like this with his head in his hands, and he doesn't smoke. He's trying not to be affected by how horrendous it must smell in this place, and these motherfuckers who have to smoke right now. So at least 4 of the characters see that he doesn't have a cigarette in his hand or a cigar or booze or anything. And a woman nearest him reaches out her cigarette case as if to say, would you like? And Ted Danson, without breaking pose, says, no thanks, I'll just breathe the air. And it's a line that comes out of nowhere, and it never fails to make me crack up because he's so perfect in the way he gets that across. He's scolding them without scolding them. I'll just breathe the air. Secondhand smoke, thirdhand smoke, fuck all y'all. I don't want to die from lung cancer. You motherfuckers shouldn't be smoking. I'll just breathe the air. So the main components of the plot, again, no spoilers, but not surprisingly, Maddie figures they've had enough sex. She can ask him, maybe you can help me with my husband. I'll help you how, Maddie? What do you mean help you? You know, he could just die one day. Does your husband have any health issues that I should know about? Does he have a pacemaker, an artificial heart? Does he have a short life expectancy? No. So he's not going to just drop dead. He's not just going to die. No. Oh. All right. Well, now we get into serious territory. He's not going to spontaneously pass away. You're asking for your help in bumping him off, if I'm reading this right. Please don't be angry with me, Ned. Kathleen reads her lines in a similar fashion to Faye Dunaway in Chinatown 7 years earlier. I actually prefer what Kathleen Turner does in Body Heat to what Faye Dunaway with her obfuscating and the way she never answers a question correctly to Jack Nicholson in Chinatown. There's, to me, more of a sense of scheming and plotting and planning and multi-level working problems out ahead of time on the part of Kathleen Turner. I feel like the Faye Dunaway character is just, she's more vague than she needs to be. It doesn't really hurt the film, but that she just continues to lie to Jack Nicholson so he can blow up at her, sort of thing. But William Hurt has a great actor moment where it's not belabored and there's no attention necessarily being brought to this one moment, but they come to an agreement. Okay, we're going to kill this guy. But it isn't enough to just throw that out there. William Hurt almost is speaking to the audience when he says the obvious. It's a little bit like the Clint Eastwood, it's a hell of a thing killing a man speech in Unforgiven. In that movie, people are already dead. But in this movie, William Hurt, as Ned Racine, just very quietly says, a man is going to die for no other reason than that we want him to. And that's a line that resonated with me, even seeing the film before I should have, because I was able to grasp it. What they're doing is horrendous. These were presented as normal, rational, law-abiding people. And I don't mean that in a goofy way, and don't laugh, but Ned Racine has not broken any laws to this point in his life. We are led to believe he has lived a straightforward college life, law school, got good grades, and now he's this kind of lazy attorney who doesn't see as many of the angles as he thinks he is. He's smart, but not quite as clever as he thinks he is. And he's just not that good of an attorney, as I said. A man is going to die for no other reason than we want him to. So William Hurt gets his buddy Teddy Lewis, the Mickey Rourke character, to help him out. And long story short, there is a terrible scene of, I don't know if I would call it murder, but there is a terrible showdown with Matty Walker, Ned Racine, and the Richard Crenna character as the husband. And it's the sort of moment where, and this happens sometimes in movies, where you're with characters and you're identifying with them until they do something and you no longer identify with them. And it's impossible. You can understand where Ned is coming from. But once he and Maddie have taken these kinds of actions, they kind of deserve whatever they get from here on out. This is completely disgusting. And I mean, they're kind of the bad guys, right? And that's classic noir, where you have people who are unspoiled, who are not bad people, who become corrupted, who become less than what they were. And all of a sudden, you go from, not only never killed anybody, I've never even been in a fight. I don't even cheat on my taxes. We're just going to murder a guy? Yeah. Hence why his friends were nervous. They sensed this woman is not up to any good. In the words of Ted Danson, that dick of yours is going to get you into a big hassle, my friend. So the performances in this movie are great all the way down the line. From, as I said, the supporting characters, such as Ted Danson's attorney and Mickey Rourke. It's not really a huge role for Mickey, but Mickey's career was absolutely on the rise. He had a lot of big ones coming up. He had Diner with Barry Levinson, who I just talked about on the channel twice. Diner was coming up the following year, and Pope of Greenwich Village, and Year of the Dragon, and so many great movies of the 80s. But you see it. Rourke had a look. He had a distinctive look. The smile, the line delivery. Sounds like he's from Brooklyn. He was actually, I believe, from Schenectady, if I'm not mistaken. William Hurt, this was his second starring role. His first film that he did was the previous year, which I'll probably talk about on the channel. One of the first movies to use CGI, Altered States. A very, very solid science fiction film with like werewolf, wolfman type elements, and a lot of very heavy science and use of psychedelics and altered states of consciousness, altered states of being. But William Hurt in this movie is really strong. And even when he kind of loses us through some of his actions, he's never less than compelling. And there are movies where you can start to hate a certain character for terrible actions they take, but you still kind of root for them. It's in the Clint Eastwood High Plains Drifter way, where Clint's character is an absolute unrepentant scumbag. But the other characters are so much worse, you still root for him. Unforgiven also. Clint's character, William Money, you would never want to meet this guy. But the people he ends up facing down, Gene Hackman, the saloon owner, they are worse than him. And they have hurt people who didn't deserve it. And so he becomes the avenging angel. And in this movie, William Hurt's character figures out exactly the mechanics of what has taken place. The movie kind of leaves it up to you to figure out, because it's not one of those endings that we would do today. This is not a Fatal Attraction ending where, Bunny Rabbit burned and dead in the bathtub and all of that. It's not that kind of movie. The movie lets you put the pieces together and comes to a conclusion that it's either a settled conclusion or not, depending on your interpretation. Kathleen Turner is extraordinary as Maddie Walker. William Hurt is brilliant as Ned Racine. Ted Danson as Lowenstein. Mickey Rourke as Teddy Lewis. Richard Crenna, phenomenal. The cast is all great. The mood feels right. And I guarantee you, if you watch this film, during the scenes of the characters sweating profusely, you're going to feel hot. You will get it. And that's to Lawrence Kasdan's credit. And John Barry, who had done the famous James Bond scores, did an extraordinary musical score for this film. Like, amazing musical score. It's kind of a love theme. Not really a love theme, but if you want to call it a sex theme, we can do that. But the movie is shot so beautifully. You feel the atmosphere. And it's not something easy to do. And it's another reason why Lawrence Kasdan is another talent who has, to some extent, been slept on. Whether it's movies like The Big Chill, or he did the Wyatt Earp with Costner, which didn't really do that well. Most people prefer Tombstone. But he's a great writer and fantastic filmmaking eye for not only putting you right into the action, but making you feel the atmosphere. It doesn't sound like much, but if you watch even a few minutes of this movie, you are going to be mopping your brow because you're going to start to pick up the heat and the temperature that it always seems to be in the 90s. It's a never-ending heat wave with no air conditioning. The movie gets my highest recommendation, whether or not you're familiar with erotic thrillers or film noir in general. I would argue that this is a top 3 movie of its type, ever made. You will be shocked, amazed, certainly dazzled by the performances. And it doesn't feel like a movie that is going to have a shit ton of plot twists, but it is, and it does. And it will drop your jaw in the final third when you realize just how deep this conspiracy mystery goes and just how smart Maddie Tyler Walker, as played by the extraordinary Kathleen Turner, just how smart, how devious she is. This is a great movie, and see it. You can rent it on Amazon Prime. It's worth a couple of bucks. Guarantee you, you will not believe your eyes. You will be saying, holy shit, holy shit, holy shit, as the credits roll. And with that, we've reached the end of episode 139 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast, the 12th entry in our continuing series, The Best Movie You've Never Seen, Lawrence Kasdan's 1981 neo-noir mystery classic Body Heat, starring William Hurt, Kathleen Turner, Richard Crenna, Mickey Rourke, and Ted Danson. But if you catch episode 139 on the YouTube channel, have enjoyed the content, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, and turn on those notifications. If you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Spotify or iTunes, click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with episode 140 real soon. Till then,